Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. On this date in 1930, there was an actual climate crisis. Record heat in the United States with 118 deaths. Great damage due to drought. Invasion of insects lays fields in waste. Forest fires swept uncontrolled over Cape Cod, Massachusetts, destroying summer cottages, timberland, and valuable cranberry bogs. Ellisville was reported confronted with a 5-mile wall of flame to which firefighters were unable to give only feeble resistance. On August 6, 1930, the United States experienced 100-degree heat from the west coast to the east coast and from the southern border to the northern border. 29 states were over 100 degrees and 45 states were over 90 degrees. Compare that to today's weather map where there's only 3 or 4 states over 100 degrees. U.S. weather is nowhere near as hot as it was during the 1930s, but NBC News says we're having record-breaking temperatures and a dangerous heat wave. This description of the summer of 1930 is from the book Washington Weather. The summer of 1930 made headlines due to unprecedented heat and drought that caused disastrous crop failures throughout the United States. The summer of 1930 ushered in the Dust Bowl era of unusually hot, dry summers that plagued the U.S. during much of the 1930s. Washington, D.C. area farmers were certainly not spared in 1930, as intense, prolonged hot spells gripped the region during late July and early August. The official temperature recorded in Washington, D.C. on July 20, 1930 was 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which holds the record as the highest temperature ever recorded in Washington. Unofficially, 110 degrees was recorded the same day on Pennsylvania Avenue, and 108 degrees was recorded at the National Cathedral. The summer of 1930 also set the record in Washington, D.C. for the number of days where temperatures reached or exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit at 11 days. The average afternoon temperature around the United States on August 6, 1930 was 93 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the hottest since 1895. Temperatures have been declining ever since, with recent years among the coolest on record. On August 6, 1930, more than 2/3 of the United States was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. But the percent of the United States with hot weather has declined sharply since then, with last year only recording about 1 station out of 5 over 90 degrees. But NBC News says we're having record hot weather, and they have red and white hot maps to prove it. Besides the record heat of 1930, that year also brought the most burn acreage in U.S. history. 1930 and 1931 were the only years when the United States had more than 50 million acres burned. According to the National Interagency Fire Center, about 5.8 million acres have burned so far this year. Burn acreage this year, which will be described as a record by the press, is down about 90% from 1930 and 1931. The drought of 1930 was so bad in the United States that by January 1931, people were starving in the U.S. in several different states. Drought relief by the Red Cross was greater than that given in any previous disaster. And this came only 3 years after what the Red Cross described as being the worst disaster year in their history. Floods and tornadoes make 1927 worst disaster year in Red Cross history. During 1927, the Red Cross had to deal with 111 disasters, including the worst flood in U.S. history along the Mississippi and the worst flood in Vermont history on the Winooski River. St. Louis was also largely destroyed by a tornado in 1927. But apparently the drought of 1930 and 1931 was even worse. 1931 brought the worst flood in history to China. 50,000 square miles of China was flooded and millions of people died. The Los Angeles Times reported on September 18, 1931, "World suffers freak weather." Academics and the press keep saying the weather is better when carbon dioxide levels are lower. But the historical record provides no evidence for their superstitions about climate. The great American physicist Richard Feynman said, "It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't make a difference how smart you are, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, the theory is wrong." It would be difficult to describe climate academics as being either smart or beautiful. But they are making a lot of money off their scam, with the Democrats giving them another $370 billion. I'm guessing that climate academics aren't big believers in karma. Meanwhile, China has officially withdrawn from Biden's climate scam. John Kerry says China is punishing the world by not going along with the Democrats' superstitions about climate. What China is actually doing is making sure their economy has enough energy. They're boosting coal production 300 million tons this year. CO2 emissions in the United States have been declining for almost 20 years, with the sharpest drop occurring while Donald Trump was president. Meanwhile, China's emissions are skyrocketing as they ramp up their usage of coal. The Biden administration says that China is punishing the rest of the world, but what's actually going on is that Democrats are punishing the American people with their climate scam. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this massive big money fraud for the past 14 years. You can visit Toto, Kyrie, Caesar, Toki, and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.